Hey everyone, it's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook, and I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hey everyone, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. Today's guest is writer Marla Taviano. Marla reached out to me about being on the show, describing herself as a former evangelical Christian good girl, author, speaker, missionary, poster child, turned agnostic who used to write books about how to be a good wife and is now divorced. Marla is into books, love, justice, globes, anti-racism, blue, gray, rainbows, and poems. She reads and writes for a living, wears her heart on her t-shirts, and is on a journey to live whole-farted. Yes, you heard that right. She's the author of Unbelieve, Fated, and Whole, and lives in South Carolina with her kids and her kids. Marla sent me a copy of her book, Unbelieve, Poems on the Journey to Becoming a Heretic, and I loved it and knew that I wanted to have her on the show. Look, Marla, it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Janice. I'm really excited to chat with you.
You've had quite the journey. I feel like you and I could probably relate in a lot of ways, from just being so gung-ho about Christianity and God and Jesus and the whole thing, and being a godly wife. You know, we could tell everyone how to do it. Well, and then here we are on the other side of things. Whoops. Tell me a little bit about how your journey began, if you were raised in Christianity, and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, thank you. I actually want to start. I'm going to flip this a little bit. I read your book, Divorcing Religion. So good. Thank you for sending me a copy. Well, I confess, I read the whole entire memoir part, and then I skimmed through the workbook, but I'm definitely going to go back and do some of that because it's,
Nice.
Yeah, wow. But I started taking notes as I was reading on my computer, because there were so many similarities in our story. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to get through this book if I stop every 2 minutes to jot a note down. But I did bring these notes with me. I'm going to read through a few of them really quickly. And It won't really, I don't think it'll give away anything that you don't want people to know until they read it. But okay, so your dad and my ex-husband were the exact same, where they were charming at church and had this temper at home. Everything you said about the rapture and the environment and how it doesn't matter, same thing. You didn't get any sex ed. My mom gave me a book called Almost 12, The Story of Sex. That was this Christian filth that I actually repurchased just a few months ago to see, and it's so terrible. I was a zealous Christian just like you at school, but I was not bullied. I secretly listened to secular music on my Walkman. I was in an emotionally painful marriage, trying not to outshine my husband. My husband is addicted to video games. There's so much codependency with me as the giver and him as the taker. And that's where I stopped taking.
Wow.
But yeah, so my story, in a nutshell, which is always tricky because we can write entire books about this, right? So I was born on an unseasonably warm Halloween morning in 1975. So I turned.
There's the problem right there. Halloween.
Yes, exactly. I went to a lot of harvest parties growing up, which was the alternative to the evil of Halloween. And I was born into an evangelical Christian home, a white evangelical Christian home. I wouldn't have called it all those things back then. I just thought we were Christians and the right kind of Christian. And as I read about people's abuse that they endured in their very conservative Christian homes, that was not my story. My parents believed very deeply in God. We were in church every Sunday morning for Sunday school, for church, Sunday night, Wednesday night prayer meeting and youth group, totally immersed and involved. But my parents were kind and loving, and I was an oldest child of 4. And as a girl, I don't remember ever being told that I couldn't do things that anyone else could do. There was no
Nice.
limit to that for me. So I thank my parents for that. In the midst of what I figured out were a lot of toxic beliefs, there was not that oppression because I was a girl. So I went on to do a million different Christian things. I was so zealous, so on fire. My faith was everything to me. Went to a Christian college after I graduated valedictorian at my public high school and gave a speech that was now proselytization is what it was. I was trying to convince all my classmates that they needed Jesus if I hadn't done a good enough job, while I was there for the entire time. Graduated with a degree in elementary education, went on to be a teacher, then a missionary, planted churches, volunteered, did everything. I write poems to the Apostle Paul and tell him that his list of credentials that he gives in one of his epistles is nothing compared to mine. I was also a Christian camp counselor, a Christian clown when I was younger. I wrote Christian books. And so now that I've deconstructed my faith, anytime someone says to me, well, you must not have really been saved, I have so many receipts. It's not even funny. Besides the 4 books and the 62 journals that I wrote to God and all the Bible studies I did and all of the ministries that I was involved in and started, it was a lot. So as far as how did I go from that to now not calling myself a Christian, if I have to give myself a label, it would probably be agnostic. Another poem I have talks about how I think I'll always be agnostic. I don't know how to atheist. Like, I don't know how to firmly believe that there is no God. And I do believe in something. I feel something outside of me, or maybe it's all just in me. I don't know. And it doesn't really matter to me now. But the slippery slope that they warn you about definitely happened to me in around 2008, 2009. I was reading a book called The Hole in Our Gospel about how if the good news that Jesus died on the cross for our sins isn't good news to an AIDS orphan in Uganda, then how is it good news? There's something missing. If we're not helping them with their illness and their poverty and their starvation, then what are we doing? So that woke me up to that. In 2012, in the States, Trayvon Martin was killed, a young Black man, and that set off some more things because we had just helped plant a church with a Black pastor friend, and I was oblivious to all of this. I didn't know about all the things that have been going on in my city, in my state, in my country for decades and centuries. So I started learning all that. In 2017, I started a Bookstagram on Instagram where I read and shared books by Black authors, Indigenous authors, other authors of color. I had been reading since I was 4, voraciously, but soon recognized that almost all the books I had been reading were by white authors by default because I wasn't intentionally seeking out other authors. So that changed everything again. Then I started, the one thing I wrestled with for a long time was how could it be okay to be gay? And then the more people I met who were gay, and especially ones who loved God with their whole hearts and had prayed every day for 30 years that God would take the gay away, and God did not take the gay away. And I thought, how can this be? There are some really nasty people out there who call themselves Christians. And then I've got gay friends who are the kindest, most loving people in the universe, and they love God and Jesus and the Bible. And yet so I just knew something was off, and I thought, okay, screw it. I can't, I'm just going to love and accept all my queer friends. And the very final piece of the puzzle, I think, was going from pro-life to pro-choice, because I just cared so much about people and babies, and I didn't want any babies to die. And then realizing that it was very much a weapon in the hands of people who called themselves pro-life and were basically fighting to take away women's rights and didn't honestly care one bit for unborn babies, born children, women, anyone. So finally, I just shed the label altogether. I realized I was still calling myself a Christian, but I wasn't going to church or reading my Bible. I didn't care what the Bible said and all of that. So it is definitely a part of me, But and it probably always will be. And sure, there are some things from the Bible that I can pull out, some things that Jesus did and said that are great and I can still hold on to, but it's definitely not the same. And going through it was a lot of hell, but the other side is so freeing. And the best part is being able to just love anyone and everyone with no strings attached, without worrying about, am I still going to heaven? Are they going to heaven? So yeah, that's my story.
Oh, wow. So where does the divorce factor in there? Were you pulling apart, deconstructing your faith while you were still married to a person who was a believer?
Yes, and that's a great question. This is something I wouldn't say trying to figure out right now, but I'm writing about it. I've written poems about my divorce. I have a whole book of poetry about it. But what happened there? So for years, when I'm writing these books to Christian women and going to speak to Christian women, I was just trying my hardest to submit to my husband because I thought that's what I should do. But I was the stronger Christian. I was the better person in most situations, and I was more qualified and just I should have been the spiritual. I was the spiritual leader in the marriage. I should have been recognized as that and just taken that. I shouldn't have married him in the first place, actually. But there was a lot of, I like you and think you're cute and I want to have sex and I can't do that until I get married. So let's get married at 22 and 21 before we even know anything about each other or our brains are fully developed. He was not always a terrible person. There are always some signs there. It's a big, long thing, but my marriage was not terrible. But it was rough. He did have a very, violent temper, but he didn't take it out on me. He would punch walls or kick things, but he wasn't hitting me or the kids.
Boy, that's my dad right there. That's my
Ooh. And so he had a heart attack in 2011 and his left anterior descending artery was 100% blocked. He should have died. He was minutes away from death. He survived at age 34. And from there went into 3 years of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, couldn't keep a job, couldn't leave the house. We lost all our money, lost everything. And then we thought God healed him and we moved to Cambodia. And we had gone to visit Cambodia right after his heart attack, just a few weeks after, because we already had our tickets and everything. We had planned to possibly be missionaries. Well, then 3 years later, we took another trip and 3 years after that, we moved to Cambodia. So in January of 2015.
You had children by now.
Mm-hmm. We had 3 daughters.
Gosh.
They are now 24, 22, and 19. At the time, I think they were 11, 9, and 6 when we moved to Cambodia. So we moved, and that's another long story of all the work that we did in Cambodia, worked with some churches, some humanitarian organizations, stopped going to church in 2017. So I was deconstructing from 2009 and then moved over in 2015 and then started putting some things on the internet and people were getting mad at me. And it was easier for me because I was all the way on the other side of the world. I wasn't sitting in church or being at family gatherings, and my sister actually disowned me over many of the things that I wrote and said I was a heretic. And this was way before I was actually even a real heretic. I was still very much a Christian. I was just talking about my gay friends and anti-racism. But
how dare you?
I know. So what I'm trying to look back on now, my divorce is not a result of my deconstruction, and my deconstruction is not a result of my divorce. So we were in Cambodia. We thought that my husband had been healed, and now instead of being in bed all the time and I'm doing everything for him, he's able to leave. He's taking moto rides out to do photography, and it seems like things are going pretty well. He still was not earning money. That was always a big thing. Like I hear about people who their husbands leave and cheat and do all these things, but at least they paid the bills and supported their family. He did not do that. Had not done that for a very, very long time. And I do believe that the heart attack changed him. But it took what was already there in his life and just made it so much worse. So there's a lot of paranoia that he had and believing things that weren't true, saying things that weren't true. So fast forward to March 2020, we moved back to the States from Cambodia at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh,
and
boy.
in September of 2020, he went to go visit his parents up in a different state, but a 10-hour drive, came back and said he wanted a divorce. We had never once spoken about divorce. However, he had been increasingly antagonistic, then freezing me out, and things were just really, really off. There was one point, and since I have these 62 journals, I can look back and see there's one point in the year before, a few months before, he was sitting on the bed in Cambodia, broke down into tears, which was very rare for him, and said, "I just don't know who I am anymore." And I thought it was just, well, we're moving back to the States. He's conflicted about this. Well, I found out 4 months after he left that he had been cheating on me with a woman in Cambodia for 4 of the 5 years that we were missionaries. So there
my
was
gosh.
only like crisis of conscience that I have any record of was him sitting on that bed crying and saying he didn't know who he was. And so now I know he was supposed to be a missionary. He's cheating on his wife. But then from there, I mean, he left, he abandoned his kids. He went back to Cambodia to be with her, then had some health problems. So he came back to the States.
Oh my gosh. How are the kids?
Well,
That's
the thing about that, like we talk about it a lot, and I'm always just trying to make sure that they are okay. But the last many years of their dad being there, he wasn't there. And when he was there, he was angry. He was mean. He was not a good dad. So for them, it's more relief. He's gone. He's out of their lives. Now, is there still some sadness? And yes, I'm sure there is. Same with me. Like people told me when he left, people who knew who he really was, people he hadn't fooled, told me, "You're going to be so much happier on the other side of this, so much freer, so much better." I knew that then, but it didn't mean that it wasn't going to hurt like hell to get through it, which is exactly how I feel about Christianity. My life on the other side is so much better, but to get here with people disowning you and saying things about you and working through things and losing a lot of friendships and comforts that you always had, it's really, really, really hard. So he would still call himself a Christian, and I do not. But the irony of that, which isn't ironic that much anymore with all of the Trump supporters we have here in the States who are calling themselves Christians. So that's all of the strides that I felt like we were making together as a couple in deconstructing and loving our neighbor more, loving our gay neighbor, our Muslim neighbor, and all of that. As far as I know, and I don't pay much attention to him these days, as far as I know, he's gone back to all of what he would have been before, what his family, they're all Trump supporters. So, it sucks. And I hate that. I mean, sometimes the things that bother me the most are when I think about, I could have picked somebody different. I could have given my kids a better dad. Because they are the main reason that I don't regret that I was married to this man. And now I'm finding redemption and being able to share with others, help them. So it's all tied in together into my story. But yeah, it wasn't a matter of, I don't believe in this anymore, so my husband doesn't want to be married to me. This is him just being selfish and cheating and
and you believed, you not only believed in the gospel, but you believed that your spouse would be like a godly person. I got my air quotes there around godly. So yeah, you tried so hard. Holy cow. You really tried hard you were the best Christian that you knew how to be. and that you could imagine being. You were really sincere, and you did so much work and wrote books and tried to encourage women. And boy, oh boy, when you said that word, submit, that is exactly why I started wearing a head covering, because I
Mm-hmm.
thought something's wrong in this marriage, and it can't be him because he's my spiritual head. It can't
Right.
be a problem with him. It has to be me. I just need to submit more. And so, short of putting duct tape over my mouth, I'll put this piece of cloth over my head. So every time
Yeah.
I look in the mirror, I can be reminded how I'm supposed to submit to this person. Yeah, it's just hard. Christianity puts people in a bind because men are supposed to behave a certain way, women are supposed to behave a certain way, but those ways aren't necessarily natural to us, to our personality. It's just hard. And then people end up tending because they've got other people in their lives, their family, their church. They have to pretend, make
Yeah.
everything look like it's doing great. And my gosh, you guys were missionaries. If
Yeah.
missionaries don't have it together, well, who has it together? So that is shocking. Thank you for sharing that. And what's exciting to me is here you are on the other side. You didn't fall apart and disappear into the background. You kept moving forward, even though it was painful and confusing and you didn't know what would come next. And that is such a profound, powerful example for your daughters and for other people who are now realizing they don't believe the same as they did. And they think, what will my life possibly be if I'm no longer homeschool wife and mother, a missionary, a pastor? All these ways that our identity and our ideology were enmeshed together. And it's
Mhm.
painful. It's
Yeah.
losses when we lose those things, tremendous losses that other people don't understand if they have never been in that situation. And so they can really downplay it and be quite invalidating. And that's not people that we need in our lives. We need to
Yeah.
connect with people who understand and will encourage and support us on this journey of discovery, of self discovery, really.
Yeah. I was going to say the reason I write is that reason to help others. It's also because I can't not write. I've always written. It's just in me. And I'm so glad it is, because even though those journals make me cringe, I'm so glad that that's my first instinct, is to write things down as they happen and process them. But what I am just really, really, I just feel really good about this. And yes, I am proud of myself for this. So I have a trilogy of what I call deconstruction poetry. And it's not conventional poetry. It's very easy to understand. It's accessible. Some of it's funny. I hope some of it's clever, but I tried to tell my story of deconstruction just like I've told all the other stories in my life. And things are changing so quickly. I could not figure out how to put it in story form, which you did that too. Like, you wrote out your whole story. And so at some point so my ex left in 2020. We moved back to the States, a new to us state. I'm trying to figure out how to survive. And I did not want to give up my writing. So I self-published my first book of poetry, and it's called Unbelieve. And I wanted this to be two books. One was going to be how it all happened. And then the second book was going to be the happy ending. This is how it is on the other side. So leading up to it, and then this is the ending. And then after I wrote that, I realized that when I was trying to write the second happy book, I still had a lot of bitterness and anger and things that I just would not let me go. And so I made it into three books. So the second book is called Jaded, a poetic reckoning with white evangelical Christian indoctrination. And I put all those labels to basically say this is a specific brand of Christianity that I am rebelling against. And while some people don't want anything to do with religion or anyone who is any part of religion, that's not my story. I have friends who are pastors. I have friends who go to church. But the difference is these are people who love everyone, who are not so worried about like a literal translation of scripture that would exclude people. I don't know if you've seen just things that are going around the internet right now after the inauguration, but there was a bishop, a woman who spoke at the National Prayer Service on the day after and spoke directly to Trump and said, I hope that you would show mercy. And we have gay and trans kids in our lives and immigrants and going on and on. And that's like, those are the kind of people who still love God, still want to go to church and be pastors, they're friends with me, because I have no problem with people's beliefs if they're not harming people. And so from there, I wrote the final book in the trilogy called Whole, Poems on Reclaiming the Pieces of Ourselves and Creating Something New. And that's when I reached back into my past, and you talk about untangling things. And that was really important to me, that I not throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. And not so much as I'm reconstructing some kind of religious beliefs, but I have a poem about people who wanted me to do that. They said, well, you can deconstruct fine, but you need to reconstruct this belief system. And I have said, no, I will deconstruct my beliefs and I'll put myself back together is what I'll
Beautiful.
do. And those are the pieces that I'm picking back up, not the pieces of a religion necessarily, even though there are things in the Bible, love your neighbor as yourself and all of that. I can do those things and not follow the Bible and go to church. So many people have done that for years and years and years. So my goal in writing these books is to, first of all, get my story down on the page, work through it myself, but also people who are going through this and who are scared, they can read this first and they can see the ending. They can look through this and say, okay, so this was hard. She's not like mincing words here. This was really hard for her. This was hard. This was hard. But there is hope at the end. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what stories do, right? We can show people that it's going to be okay. Like my biggest fear in the world is one of my kids dying. And hearing from people who've lost a child and they survived gives me hope that I could survive the hardest thing that could ever happen to me. Same with divorce and infidelity. When I tell my story and people talk to me and they are fresh and new in this and think, how am I going to survive this? And they can see, okay, look, she survived this. It happened to her and she survived. And that's what I hope to do. I also hope that it's kind of like a shortcut, just like people go to therapy or get coaching or do whatever in an attempt to make it easier to get to the other side of something. They need someone who has knowledge, or they need someone who's been there. And that's what I hope these books are. If you can see the trajectory that I took, and it's not a prescription. It's not, you need to take all these steps or you need to do this like I did it. That's not it at all. But if there's anything in there that can help you make sense of something more quickly or to get through with a little less suffering, then I hope that that's what happens. And I've gotten to hear from so many people that is the case with them. And the other exciting thing is that they then go and write their own poetry or tell their own story, because I've given them permission. And also, oh, I could write a poem like this. I could do that. And then they go and do it and they feel better and they write another one. And so I'm hoping to just start this revolution of healing and poetry and art and telling our stories. And like you're doing on the podcast, I mean, that's why you're doing this, right? You hear these stories, you share them with your audience, spread the word, change the world. Sometimes it can feel like we are up against just a brick wall in front of us, but there's so much that each one of us can do.
Oh, yeah. And poetry in particular, I don't know, there's something about poetry that is so intensely liberating and cathartic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not one typically for, reading a whole book of poetry, but on a topic like this, like deconstruction poetry, it's hard for me to put such a book down. And you're putting yourself on those pages. I just think it's a very powerful healing agent, poetry can be. And I have a friend, Stephanie, and she does something that she called blackout poetry. And she would take a Bible from a
Yes.
thrift store or her old Bible, and of course,
Yes.
black out any of the words, cover over them that she didn't want. And then she would actually make art on the page as well. It's
Mhm.
quite beautiful. So, yeah, there are lots of different ways that we can express how we're doing, express our grief and loss, and even our hope. And this can be helping us move forward at the same time, helping us with our healing. I don't on the show usually talk about bodily functions, but I want to hear about your book or about living whole farted. Would you please elaborate on that?
Yes. First, I want to take a small detour because you're talking about blackout poetry, and I do that too. And I do it with the old books that I wrote. So I can turn a page into submitting to your husband into something completely different.
I
And
love it.
so that has been creative and fun to do. And also, and I'm not going to say this word out loud, and I don't know if you share video or if you just do audio for your podcast, but ever since the inauguration, I have been making, well, let me back up. I make poem art. So I take poems from my book. I started with just a copy of my book where the cover was all messed up and I couldn't sell it. I cut out the poems and I glued them onto illustrations from vintage kids' books from my childhood. So it's like bringing a little piece of my childhood, putting the poem on. And Frog and Toad are two of my favorites. I don't know if you're familiar with them. But
Mhm.
Arnold LaBelle, their creator, was a gay man who didn't come out until, well, he might not have publicly until after his death. So Frog and Toad lived together. And so I have been making these poems and things with them. And this, ever since the inauguration, I just have the F word on here with little
Yes, yes.
illustrations of Frog and Toad, because I have another poem that says, when you can't, something about when you can't say it all, say less. Like just when there are no words, just say one word. It can be a bad word. It could be not a bad word. It can be a curse word. It could be any kind of word.
Yes.
But you asked about what makes. Oh no, you asked about whole farted. But I have a book called "What Makes You Fart." Find your passion and figure out your life by the time you finish reading this book. And I have found that many people are more uncomfortable with the word fart than they are the other F word sometimes. Like they weren't allowed to say it growing up, or it just feels wrong. But the story behind that is that we were sitting in a circle of camping chairs in 2013, me and some members of my family, and we were going to take our little kids to go visit the barn where my uncle, and it was my grandpa's barn. He had handed it down to my uncle, and to see the cows, because that was always a fun thing for kids who lived in the city to go do. And my uncle said, well, don't bring them at milking time. And I said, oh, because it makes the cows too excited. And he said, no, because the dung and urine production increases exponentially. And we don't want that happening while they're trying to be milked. And this light bulb went on in my head that when cows get excited, they poop. When I go into bookstores, I immediately have to go to the bathroom. Like I just had this, and so I do. And so I thought, what is this? Like, so I started talking to my family, and someone said, oh, I have to fart in bookstores too, but I thought it was the coffee because I love the smell of coffee. Someone else said, every time I'm out in nature, I have to fart. And on. Everybody has this. So I'm looking it up on the internet. Is there a thing? The only thing I could find way back then was this massage therapist who was saying that when people are relaxed on her table, they will often fart and they feel bad. She's like, no, that just means that you are relaxed, at ease, and happy. And I thought, that is it. When your body is relaxed, that's what it's supposed to be doing, right? When you're constipated, something's wrong. Something's blocked. You can't. And you talk about writer's block, and so it was all coming together. Listening to your body. What is your body telling you? Does your body feel anxious now? Does it feel relaxed? Does it feel happy? And if you can find that place where it's happy and relaxed, that's probably what your passion is. It has worked for me. And so I kind of made it this gimmicky thing for a while, but it's also real. It's a real thing where getting in touch with your body, which was something we didn't do as conservative evangelical Christians. Our bodies were evil. We couldn't listen to them or talk to them or talk about them or let them be seen or any of that. Getting in touch with what makes your body happy, and that's what you do. So when I'm writing, when I'm making poem art, it's not that I just sit there and pass gas constantly, but I am in this happy, relaxed state. And that's what I want for people, especially now with everything that's going on in the world around us, and being able to regulate your body, to find things that are healing, and then to make art and put it out in the world. And art is going to be what saves us, what heals us. Art and story, they can't take that away from us. And some of the best art is made during times of oppression. And so it all just comes together in this really sweet, connected, serendipitous way, which is another thing that makes me fart, is serendipity. Anytime, like when I'm say I'm reading your book and there's something that just resonates with me completely. Like we grew up in two totally different places and having never met each other, and yet there's something that's the same. And that's what I want people to read in my poetry. And yeah, it just gets me really excited and makes me really happy.
Wow. You're touching on some significant things there, and you're commenting that when we're in Christianity, we're not really allowed to think about our bodies, talk about our bodies. And that makes me think of sex and purity culture and pleasure. And of course, I host the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference. I'm holding that in May in Seattle. It'll be the first time I do it in person.
Oh, wow.
But there's something that's really... I like what you're touching on there about to be comfortable with ourselves, to be able to be at peace with ourselves. And of course, that's the case too when it comes to sexual pleasure and orgasm. You have to be, you have to feel safe enough that you can let go of everything and experience that intense pleasure. And that's something that a lot of people, when they grew up in religious homes, they were prevented. They weren't permitted to experience that pleasure. And then they get married and they're taught that it's, or they think it's going to be like just a light switch. Okay, I was never allowed to think about or touch myself or do any, and now I'm going to get married.
It was bad and evil, and now it's
amazing.
Great.
Yeah. It's crazy thinking about things that way, but that's how it is. And then, when a couple is able to deconstruct or even deconvert together at the same time, I think sometimes then the chances are greater for them to be able to preserve their union if that's what they want to do. But also recognizing divorce isn't a failure. Divorce is a transition. There's no shame in divorce. It's okay, my life was like that yesterday, and today it's like this. So I'm walking through a new door. But it's the church and the biblical ideas around divorce and what's acceptable. And then, of course, all the different ways that men through the centuries have interpreted, misinterpreted, reinterpreted, whatever the original person, because it was a person who wrote down these thoughts. So it's it's like layers of an onion, really. We're just constantly shedding and unpeeling these things that were put onto us rather than things necessarily that we decided were for us. Many of us were raised in Christian homes. And so that's what we knew. And we were taught that was the only truth, the literal truth. And if you turn your back on that, there's going to be terrible consequences. So of course, as a kid, we didn't feel like we could reject it. And because our parents were responsible for our safety, we had to trust our parents and at least make them think what we believed the same way they did. I mean, I did believe it and you did believe it too. But so now we're on the other side of things and continuing just to get to know ourselves as we really are. I mean, the person I chose at 24 that I thought would be my forever life partner is apparently, not the same person I would have chosen at 44 because he was not.
Yeah.
It's just we're different. When we marry young and we have all the biblical reasons for why we need to get married. And like you said, our brain's not even finished
Right.
developing when we're in our early 20s. So it's a lot. Deconstruction is a lot. Deconversion is a lot. Do you feel like your connection with writing helps to keep you sane, help to keep you from going off the deep end?
Absolutely. 100%. And I tell people that all the time. I don't know what I would have done without it. And I also don't know, like, that's just my natural bent. That's what I want to do. That's what I love to do. Some people don't love to write. So my hope for them is that they can find some way, something, whether it's expressing it verbally, the things that they're working through, or if it's, I don't know, if when they're making something, crocheting or making woodworking or chopping down trees or something, that they can get that out and express that. If it's listening to other people talk or reading, I don't know. But for me, it's just always, it's always been that way. I have always written down how I'm feeling. It helps me figure out what that means. And then looking back on it, I can see, even looking back through these journals, which is kind of painful, I can see the me that wanted to be free, the me that would say, I know I'm supposed to do da 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 da, and I keep doing da 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 da. And the thing that I kept doing was the thing that I should have kept doing, because that was actually the real me, and there was nothing wrong with my flesh that I was saying I needed to control. And so I'm definitely at a place. And the older you get, you don't care as much. Like, there are some things that you're like, yeah, I don't care about that anymore. So that definitely helps. But overall, I mean, my life is not perfect. It's not easy, but overall, I wake up each morning just really excited to write more, to read more, to create more, to connect more. And it's just so full and free, and I'm whole. And I'm on this, I guess the way I would explain it is, I'm on this journey to freedom and wholeness, but I actually feel really free and whole now too. Like, it's not something where I hope in 5 years I'm really free and I'm really whole. Like, I feel really free and really whole now. I just believe that there's probably even more freedom and more wholeness and more opportunity and more healing and more excitement. And so I'm trying to live in the moment, also look to the future, look back in the past a little bit. I made up this equation a few months ago. I forget what it was, like the exact numbers. Something like, I want to spend 70% of my energy in the right now, 15% looking past, and 15% preparing for the future. Like, if that's kind of the idea that I have. And turning 50 this year too, I'm looking back on some fun things from growing up in the 70s and 80s and writing about that. And even simple things where people are sharing. I've seen a couple Facebook groups where people share toys or movies or things from the 80s that have just triggered all of these really, really, really good memories. So I've got a lot of unhappy triggers about certain things, but then so many happy ones too. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun to connect with people over silly things, over deep things. And sometimes the silly things lead to the deep things. And yeah, like you said, getting to know ourselves, our bodies, what makes us happy, pleasure. These men, they want to control us. That's what all of it is about.
Yeah.
Any kind of rule or law or thing that they pass is literally about controlling everyone else, particularly women or people of color. And I'm not going to be controlled. I work for myself, so I don't have a boss. My dad doesn't tell me what to do. I'm not married. I don't go to church. I am the boss of me. And some people just do not like that. They're like, wait, so who tells you what to do? But who? I'm like, nobody. Nobody tells me what to do, because I can make really good decisions and I can trust my intuition, which is something I'm learning to do after not realizing for 4 years that my husband was cheating on me. I mean, that's a blow to your, wait a second, how can I trust myself? But knowing like faithfulness in marriage was so ingrained in me and so important to me, I just assumed that it was that important to him. That's why. So now looking back, I can see a few signs, but I dismissed them because no, of course not. He was a
Right.
godly Christian man, or says he is anyway. So,
Yeah.
it's great.
You're so excited and passionate, and really the word I think is just fun. And you do remind me of a little kid in that way. And then when you said
Thank
70%
you.
of you to live in the now, that's what kids do. They're all about the now. And that's
Yeah.
all they know. That's all they can do.
Yeah.
And they're just so exuberant and curious. And I mean, religion, especially fundamentalism, it can't abide curiosity. It has to stamp out curiosity
Oh,
in
yeah.
favor of obedience. And so that's part of reclaiming who we really are, is latching on to curiosity. I am going to
Yeah.
let myself study whatever I want, read what I want, go where I want. It's giving ourselves permission when it's been a lifetime of being denied
Yeah.
permission, and it can feel scary. And I certainly recommend that people reach out to a religious trauma recovery coach, counselor, therapist, somebody who understands, who can support and validate, and also potentially offer guidance from time to time. Because sometimes we just have an idea and we think, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to run with it. And it can be helpful to have someone on the outside say, yes, that does sound fun. And have you considered what might happen if you actually do that? So it can be helpful to talk with somebody. And I mean, you had your writing to keep you grounded. When I divorced religion, I divorced everything about it. I just really denied myself nothing. I purposed in my heart I would deny myself, and I denied myself nothing. And so, boy, there were some great times and some crazy times, and some times that I certainly ended up having to apologize to my children. There were people who were hurt. I talk about the idea of feeling like a beach ball forced into the water for too long. You can feel the pressure building. And we take our hands off, and comes the ball and splashes, water goes everywhere. There's fallout from these things. And so we'd like to be able to deconstruct, deconvert in a thoughtful way to mitigate the fallout that will potentially hurt other people. Now, some people are just plain going to be hurt and upset because they don't agree with what we're doing, and they feel our rejection of the Bible is a rejection of them personally, which it's not. But we stay in our own lane. We don't veer into their lane by trying to manage their emotions and reactions. We can let them be grown-ups and own their own feelings, and we can make the apologies that we feel are necessary and sincere for us to do, and then we can keep going. We keep living our life, and we have to trust that other people are going to be able to keep going and keep living their lives as well. But that takes a real maturity, I think, emotional maturity to get to that point.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't argue for the most part with people anymore. I'm not here for the people that want to fight. I'm here for the people who have questions, who have doubts, who are, like you said, curious, who want to know, is this possible? Like people coming to me from my past and saying, my daughter just came out as gay. Is it possible for me to love her and still love God? And I love that people see me, some people see me as very dangerous, very whatever, but other people are quietly seeing the things that I write about, talk about, and see me as a safe place to ask those questions. And I can't give myself to everyone. So I am here for the people who genuinely want to know how to love people, who genuinely want to figure things out. And it's been a lot better since the days that I used to fight people to try to persuade them that they were racist or whatever it was that I was talking about at the moment. And I don't do it perfectly to this day. And I don't know that there is a perfect way to deal with all of that. But yeah, I just love the space that I'm in. I love the work that you're doing. I love that we got to have this chat. And
yes, this was great fun. Please tell me how people can find you and where they can find you.
Well, right now, Meta, which is owned by one man, which is Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, and is having some problems, and we'll see. That's where I've spent a lot of my time, is Instagram and Threads, at Marla Taviano, and then at White Girl Learning on Instagram. I do have a website, marlataviano.com, that I'm going to invest a lot more time in now. I'm going to sell some of my art and my books there. I'm getting all that put together. And then I have a Substack, which is marlataviano.substack.com. And it's called Writing Wholefarted. And I have been sharing a poem a week, but now I have some essays and some things I want to share. So my website and Substack are two of the places that are not owned by billionaires yet. that people can connect with me. And my books can be found, my poetry trilogy can be found anywhere. And then the other three I self-published, and those are just on Amazon right now, or people can buy them directly from me.
Yeah, and of course, I'm sure you're well on your way to becoming a cajillionaire, since you have so many books that you've written.
You would be surprised at how little money I have made thus far, but I feel like my 50th year is, I'm going to make some magic. So yeah, excellent. I would love to sell lots more copies of my books.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this has just been such a delight connecting with you. Thank you very much. I'll let you know when this episode is going to drop, and it'll be on YouTube, and then people will also be able to just listen to the audio version. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you, Janice. Have a good day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. It was great to have you with us. And we'll see you again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.